Think about the last thing you promised yourself you would finish. Not the thing you finished, the thing you didn't. Maybe it was a book, a business idea, a workout routine, a skill, a project, a dream. Something that once felt important, something that once felt exciting, something you genuinely believed would change your life. Now here's the uncomfortable question. Where is it now? Because most unfinished goals don't die dramatically, they die quietly. A skipped day, a delayed decision, a small excuse, a promise to continue tomorrow, and then somehow, tomorrow becomes next week becomes next month, and eventually you stop thinking about it altogether, until one random moment years later when you remember it and wonder what happened. Most people think they know the answer. I got lazy. I wasn't disciplined. I didn't want it enough. But science suggests something far more interesting, because your brain has a hidden tendency that makes starting feel amazing and finishing feel almost impossible. And if you don't understand it, you can spend years repeating the same cycle, starting, stopping, restarting, regretting, over and over again. Part 1. The trap begins before you start. Imagine 2 moments. The first moment is the day you decide to start something new. The second moment is 3 weeks later. The first version of you is excited, motivated, optimistic. The future looks different, better, bigger. The second version of you doesn't feel that way anymore. The excitement is gone, the energy is gone, the vision isn't as clear, and that's when most people think something is wrong. But nothing is wrong. In fact, your brain is doing exactly what it was designed to do. Researchers have found that anticipation often creates more excitement than possession. Your brain loves possibility. Possibility is perfect. Reality isn't. When you imagine learning a skill, your brain sees the reward. When you actually learn the skill, you experience the work. And work feels very different from imagination. That's why buying gym equipment feels productive, planning feels productive, researching feels productive. But none of those things are the goal. The goal is the work. And the moment the work begins, most people encounter a problem they never expected. The boring middle. Part 2. The most dangerous place on earth. The most dangerous place for any goal isn't the beginning, it's the middle. Nobody talks about the middle. The beginning gets all the attention. The finish line gets all the attention. The middle gets nothing. And that's where dreams disappear. The middle is where progress feels slow. Results become invisible. Effort feels endless. And your brain starts asking a question. Is this even worth it? This is where most people quit. Not because they failed, because they stopped receiving emotional rewards. The excitement that pushed them forward is gone. Now all that's left is repetition. And repetition isn't exciting. But here's the twist. The people you admire also experience this exact stage. The difference is they don't interpret it the same way. Most people see boredom as a sign to stop. High performers see boredom as a sign they're finally doing real work. That's a completely different mindset, and it changes everything. Because if you expect the middle to feel exciting, you'll quit every time. Part 3. The identity crisis. Now things get deeper, because finishing isn't only about productivity, it's about identity. Think about this. Every time you quit something important, you teach yourself something, not intentionally, but your brain is always learning. Every unfinished promise becomes evidence. Evidence that maybe you can't trust yourself, evidence that maybe you won't follow through, evidence that maybe you're the type of person who quits. And that's where the real damage happens, not in the project, in your self-image. Because eventually the goal isn't what's holding you back. It's the story you've started believing about yourself. And stories are powerful. A person who believes they're disciplined behaves differently. A person who believes they're unreliable behaves differently. A person who believes they never finish anything behaves differently. That's why unfinished goals hurt so much. They're not just unfinished tasks. They're unfinished identities, unfinished versions of yourself. Every abandoned dream leaves behind a question. What if I had continued? And those questions can follow people for years. Part 4. The terrifying part. Nobody talks about. Imagine 2 people. The first person quits one important goal every year. The second person finishes one important goal every year. For the first year, the difference is small. By year 5, it's huge. By year 10, they're living completely different lives. Not because one person worked harder, because one person accumulated evidence. Finished goals create confidence, finished goals create skills, finished goals create opportunities, finished goals change identity. Most people underestimate what happens when you keep promises to yourself. The effect compounds, just like interest, tiny actions, repeated consistently, creating massive differences over time. And the opposite is also true. Tiny postponements, repeated consistently, creating years of regret. That's why this topic matters. Because this isn't really about finishing a book, or a workout plan, or a side project. It's about the direction of your life. Part 5. How to finally finish. Here's the mistake. Most people focus on starting. They should focus on finishing. Starting requires emotion. Finishing requires system. Starting requires motivation. Finishing requires commitment. Starting feels exciting. Finishing often feels ordinary. That's why a simple rule works surprisingly well. Lower the bar, not the goal, the bar. Make progress so easy that quitting becomes harder than continuing. Because consistency beats intensity every time. You don't need heroic effort. You need repeated effort. And repeated effort is much easier to sustain. Right now, there is probably something in your life that came to mind while watching this video. One thing, one unfinished promise, one abandoned goal, one version of yourself you left behind. The question isn't whether you can finish it, the question is whether you'll continue the same cycle. Because years from now, you'll either have a story about why you stopped, or a story about why you kept going. And that choice is happening right now. Not tomorrow, not next week, not when motivation returns, right now. Most people spend their lives becoming experts at starting. New goals, new habits, new plans, new promises. But the people who change their lives become experts at something else. Finishing. Because every finished promise sends a message that says, I can trust myself. And there are very few things more powerful than that. Before you leave, ask yourself one question. What is one thing you've never forgiven yourself for quitting? Keep that answer, because it might tell you exactly what you need to finish next.